a few things before we get into like the full branding discussion. But all the things that I am discussing before that do have to do with your branding in a great way. So specifically your goals. So what do you want to accomplish with your brand? Is it that you want to connect with your ideal target audience and create a relationship with them that keeps them coming back? Do you want to improve your brand recognition and raise awareness of your brand, gain more visibility on different platforms? So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. But also that's something that's really huge that has to be considered before even getting into the execution of branding. So another thing to greatly consider before getting into branding is who your target audience is. And I always like to say, really get into their psyche and what they are doing, what they are thinking, what's their favorite color, their favorite coffee shop, what shows do they watch, what's their favorite movie that they love to watch every weekend. So just really creating a personality for your target audience. And then also understanding the basics. So what information do they want to learn? What services are they seeking? What products are they wanting to buy? How can you bring them to you? How can you attract them to your business? And how can your messaging align with what they want and need? So the third thing to discuss is your uniqueness. So what is it that sets you apart from your competitors? What helps bring your audience to you? What value do you give them? And what gap can you fill in their lives that may bring them more to you easily? So now that we've discussed the goals and who your target audience is, we want to get into how to capture them. So let's get into it. The first thing to discuss, though, is the difference between a business and a brand. So a lot of people tend to miss the same thing. They are totally different. So the business is the foundation. It's all of the logistics, the products, the services, your offerings, the pricing for that, the structure of your business, and how things are implemented within that. The brand is essentially how I like to describe it. It's your business's personality. So it's what gives your business that extra edge and brings the audience to you time and time again, because not only are you creating an experience for the audience, but you are creating a connection and evoking that emotion that makes them feel connected to your business. So now getting into building the brand. So we've talked about your audience, your goals, and how to basically create a personality based on certain things that you want to achieve. Now we create the visual aspect. So how do we build that, that process that evokes that emotion? So my key components that I always stick to when creating a branding deck for a client are the following. So that is a broken down ideation and description of your target audience. That is the tone of voice that you want to use. So if like I would use descriptive words, so like classy, elevated, strong, bold. So use adjectives to describe the tone of voice that you want to portray to your audience. Your vision and your mission should always be included in your branding deck. And then, of course, the visual aspects would be the font selections, the color palette curation, and the logo variations to use. So here is an example of a branding summary, just of the visual parts. So as you can see, we have a primary and a secondary logo. We have 4 different font selections, and then we have 5 colors within the color palette. So this is just to give you a quick idea. But so now let's get into kind of the different components. So specifically choosing your fonts. So fonts are really fun for me. I took a class in college and it was all about fonts, which I know can be probably boring for a lot of people, but for me, it was like I had a field day. It was like a kid in a candy shop. So basically, the way that it was broken down to me for so many years and how I look at it is that there are 4 different groups of fonts. There are, of course, a few outside of these groups that could be categorized in a different way, but these are the main categories that I like to look at when creating a brand. So the first one being a serif. Typically you'll see Times New Roman when you're writing an essay. That was a serif. So anything with these little ticks on the end is a serif and can be considered that way. Sans serif, the Latin sans means without. So it's basically a serif without those ticks. So those tend to be more sleek and simple. Script are any fonts that link together. So those typically look like handwriting, cursive, signatures, that kind of thing. And then a slab serif is essentially a serif, but with thick, bold ticks on the end. So this is important when you get into choosing your fonts. So when choosing them, you want to have a header, a subheader, a body font, and then sometimes you also want to add an accent font. And you want to make sure that the fonts you choose are compatible with one another. My go-to compatibility is a serif and a sans serif, whether that be the header or subheader or a paragraph. You can switch them around, but those are my two favorite that I love to pair together because almost always they look great together and are easy to read, which is a huge thing that you need to pay attention to. Is if the font you are looking at in multiple sizes is easy to read, even in its smallest form and in its biggest form. And if you look away or you hold it a little further away from you, you're still able to kind of see it. And then also you want to make sure that the accent font that you're using is elevating your vision. So you're not just choosing a random font just because it's pretty, but you want to make sure that it works with the fonts that you are using and it goes with the vibe that you are trying to create with your brand. And then you also want to make sure that the fonts you're choosing are in a way timeless because you want this to be everlasting. You want to be consistent and create that brand recognition. So with that, you are going to be using these fonts a lot. So you don't want them to fade with the different trends flowing in and out. You want them to be something that really feels at home for you and that represents you accurately. So on the left, you can see an example of another font pairing I did for a client where the header and the subheader are both sans serifs and the body paragraph is a serif. So here is one last combination, and I love to do this for clients where I create almost like a visual layout of how their fonts would actually look on a website. So I highly recommend when doing your font selections that you put it in a way that you're going to use it in the future, because when you see it on the left here, it may look good, but then when you put it into a paragraph and you layer the header and the subheader and you put it into a fake button, you may be like, I'm not obsessed with this, or I could change this. So I think it really gives a good visual for you to move forward with and say, okay, no, this is perfect, or maybe I need to adjust something. So deciding on now your color palette. So as you can see on the right, I have a color selection that I did for another client. On the top is a very hefty color palette selection, and on the bottom is a more condensed version of the top selection. So like I say on the left, I typically recommend between 4 and 6 colors. But with this client, she wanted a more extravagant, eclectic vibe to her brand. So we gave her a bunch of other colors to use that worked with each other, but it was definitely a wider array of colors. And this was specifically to be used on social media, but for things like her website, her business cards, and anything that was a little bit more condensed, we wanted a smaller palette to choose from to keep that kind of consistency going. You want to make sure that the colors you're choosing have a dark and light variant. What I mean by that is you have a dark color and a very bright color, almost white, or almost black or black. Doesn't have to be black or white, but around that kind of tone. So that way, when you are layering colors, they're easy to read on top of one another. So if you have a dark navy blue background and a gray or light gray, almost white font, you're going to be able to read it because of that contrast in the color. You also want to make sure that these are colors you like. So just like your fonts, you're going to be seeing a lot of them, especially by creating that brand recognition and that consistency. So you want to make sure that the colors you are choosing are ones that you're going to enjoy seeing all the time. But you also want to make sure that you choose colors with intention so that they evoke emotion within your branding. And I'll get into that in the next slide. So I love this topic, color psychology. When I'm creating a brand color palette for a client, I almost always look at this diagram. And essentially what it breaks down is how each color evokes an emotion, is used in an industry, and what they are used to do. So for example, the color red, the first three. So the color red evokes the emotion of excitement. It's used primarily in the entertainment or food or sport industry, and it's used to stimulate, create urgency, and draw attention. So these are things you want to consider when you're creating a color palette, is what do these colors evoke in the person that's looking at them? So now your logo. So I know a logo can be pretty daunting for someone, especially if designing is not your forte. Oh, Maddie, it's not for me. Totally okay. There are ways to create a logo that you love without creating something extravagant. So on the right is a breakdown of the 5 different categories, we could say, of logos. If you are a newer brand, I typically recommend sticking with a word mark, an emblem, or letter form, because you are still kind of establishing who you are to people. Once you get more established and you've created that brand recognition, you can move more into the pictorial and abstract logos, like Nike, for example. You know that that checkmark swoosh is Nike. You know that for a fact, and you don't even have to look at the word Nike to know that that swoosh is Nike. So that's just kind of an example of why the abstract is for more, I typically recommend waiting until you have established your brand a little bit more. Sorry, my dog is crying. I don't know if everyone can hear it, but apologies. But also for your logo, it should also be meaningful to your brand in the sense that you are choosing things intentionally that connect with your brand and your vision. So also by creating primary and secondary logos, you give yourself a little bit more of a variety. So your primary would, like, for example, Disney has the D with the ISNEY, but then you also know that just the D alone is Disney. And when you see that by itself, you know that's Disney. You also want to make sure that you can use this logo in the different variations of your color palette. So seeing it, let's say you have green and blue in your color palette. You want to make sure that in both green and blue, the logo looks really good, especially when layered on the other colors within the color palette. And you also want to make sure that it layers well and that you're obsessed with it. So again, you always want to make sure that you're obsessed with it, with your font, your colors, your logo, because like I said, you're going to be seeing this a lot. You more than anyone else, because be the one behind the scenes creating those designs or having someone create these designs for you and approving them. No matter what, you're going to be representing these colors, these fonts, and these logos. So here is a logo variation that I created for a client. So the primary would be the one on the left, which fully writes out her entire name. And then the one on the right is the letter form, the word emblem. That is the 3 different letters that start each. It's the acronym for it. So the reason we did the one on the left the way we did, we created this very custom design for her because she wanted that more extravagant, eclectic vibe. And she essentially creates remixed vintage jewelry. So she takes little pieces from different jewelry pieces and creates one different and unique piece that's totally custom. So she really wanted that custom feel to her logos. So that's what we tried to create here. The next one we created, we used the different fonts. We used her serif and her script font to layer them together and create that kind of whimsical but professional feel. And then we included this crescent moon that is kind of holding and hugging the logo. Lilo, no, sorry. And then the last logo I want to show is made on Canva, actually. So the last 2 were made within Adobe to show you that customization is so doable. But also you can create a custom and unique logo on Canva. So we created this one for our client that actually travels abroad with her clients. And so we created this stamp on the right that looks just like the stamps that you have on your passports. So we really liked that unique custom element, and we created it in Canva. So it is so possible to create a custom logo for your business. You don't need to know all of Adobe Creative Suite. You just need to have your brain and your understanding of who what your business is, what you offer, and who you are. So I do want to mention a few of my favorite platforms that I use when designing and creating this brand for my clients so first and foremost, of course, Canva. I mean, I even created this presentation on Canva. Here at Forward Female, we are obsessed with Canva. So I will be always screaming that on the rooftops that I love this platform, because not only is it easy to manage your projects, but it's also really easy to implement your branding and keep that consistency, because you can actually save your branding within Canva's platform, especially if you're a pro user. You can save your colors, your fonts, and your logos so that at the simple click of a button, you can implement those into your designs very quickly. You don't have to keep copy and pasting hex codes. You don't have to keep uploading your logo. It's one and done. So are Unsplash and Pexels. These are two great websites if you are not loving any images that you have at the moment and you kind of want a more elevated look and feel. Unsplash and Pexels are great websites that you can find royalty-free images, meaning you can use them and you don't have to pay for them, but they are of the quality of stock images. So they're high resolution, really beautiful images. So that can be used on socials and websites, etc. So then, of course, Adobe Creative Cloud I have to include because I do use this a lot for my clients' logos. It is a great platform if you know how to use Photoshop, InDesign, and Illustrator. I do recommend using it in your branding. If it's something that's not in your wheelhouse, please don't feel like you need to learn it to create the perfect brand. As I showed, you can create different and unique logos within Canva just fine. So if that's not something you already know or have experience with, you don't need to learn the whole creative suite to create the brand that is perfect for you. So the last two are Coolors and the Noun Project. So the Noun Project is essentially kind of like my second to Canva when it comes to visual elements. So if you've used Canva before, you've seen on the left tab how you can search elements and, like, for example, you can look up flowers. If you're not finding something you're obsessed with in there, I would then resort to the Noun Project. It is a great second option. And then Coolors is actually one of my favorite websites to use for color palettes. Essentially, it shuffles through different colors. You can change the tone, the hue, and then just keep hitting the space bar until you find a color palette you like. You can even lock certain colors. So let's say in one color palette, you found a purple that you are obsessed with, but you don't really like the other ones. You can lock that purple and then keep clicking through to see different colors generate through there. So now creating brand recognition. So you've created this beautiful branding deck of colors, fonts, messaging, but now you have to actually create that recognition. And that means showing up in front of your audience consistently. And not only are you obsessed with this brand, but you're making it recognizable by being in front of the people you want to attract. So how you do this, you must be consistent on all the platforms you're showing up, whether in person or online. So that means your website, your business cards, your email signatures, the ways that you are presenting yourself to people is going to affect that. So you also want to align the brand value that you are introducing with your brand and your tone of voice to those values and the tone of voice that your audience may use or appreciate. You also are making every decision with your branding and with your business with your audience in mind. So you're considerate of who they are, what they like, what they want every time you're making a decision about your brand. So example would be with your colors is I know that my audience is looking for peace and tranquility. So I'm going to look for a color that evokes that emotion. So I think that would be blue if I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. And then last but not least, put your logo on everything. So that could be your icon in your social media logo. It's not Lilo. That could be on the bottom of your website, the top of your website, of course, on your business card, but you want that logo to be showing up everywhere so that when people see it, even if it's just kind of in passing or your business card is laying, they're like, oh, I remember that person, or I remember connecting with them. So now here is kind of an array of the ultimate branding deck we created for a client. So not only did that include all of the visual elements discussed in our key components at the beginning, but it also included a full array of social media template designs, a fully designed and ready to print business card, and then an email signature. So with this bundle of everything that we offered her, she was able to then move forward in brand recognition by showing up in person with the business card, in her communications with her emails, and online with her website and her social media. Noticing the little things. So a lot of these kind of get overlooked just because they are quite small, but I think that these are actually what make a huge difference when it comes to brand recognition and consistency. And then this also, I strongly believe, really sets you apart from the competition within your industry. So the first being creating a favicon for your website. So a favicon is a small little icon that is typically in the tab on the browser. And what it does is it separates your website tab from the others. So as you can see, this small lemon, as someone who has been to Maria's website a ton, I know that that lemon, that's her website. And among all of my tabs, which I know a lot of people have a million tabs open on their browsers, my mom, my coworkers. So it is super common that people have so many things going on at the same time. You want to make sure that when they get to the end of their day and they're closing tabs, that they recognize yours and they're like, actually, let me go back to that site. I remember this about them. Again, including your logo on everything, and creating those unique social media icons. So like your what do you call it? Your avatar, your profile picture, I guess you could say. And then last but not least, I highly recommend changing your mindset around branding. If you're looking at it in a way where it feels kind of like a chore, something that you have to do for your business, try and switch the mindset into thinking this is kind of something that you get to enjoy. This is something crafty, somewhere you get to be really creative and enjoy your time doing it, and share it with the people that you appreciate so that they can give you feedback on that. So now we've discussed kind of everything to include and everything you should do. So now I do want to touch a little bit on things to avoid, just so that you have these in mind when moving forward with creating branding. So some things to avoid, specifically, don't switch up your colors, your fonts, or your logo. Once you have decided on your branding, it is crucial that you are as consistent as possible. That means being really dedicated and loyal to that brand deck. Obviously, if you run into a moment where you're realizing that your brand is not accurately representing your business or not accurately attracting your audience, then it may be time to consider a rebrand. When you do rebrand your business, it is so important that the way you do it is properly introduced to your audience, so there's minimal confusion when they're seeing your new vision. They still recognize you in a way because you're still evoking the emotions that you're wanting to attract. You're still pulling them in, or maybe you have a certain element from your old branding that you keep in your new branding. Also, don't choose colors or fonts just because, like I've said, these things can evoke emotion. These things can draw your audience in. So it is so crucial that you are very intentional with what you choose. So that way, when they're seeing it, maybe subconsciously, they are emotionally attached to your business, or they are connected to your business because you evoked that emotion or you created that connection through those simple visual elements. A lot of people may think that does not matter. It does. It's not obviously conscious thinking, oh, I like this brand because they are blue. It's not that. It's a subconscious feeling. It's like, oh, wow, I feel really at peace looking at this brand. I feel really tranquil. Or I feel really bold and I'm looking at this red brand. They have my attention, that kind of thing. And also, I highly recommend sending your branding to at least 5 people that you really trust, whether that be a mentor, someone within your industry that is a friend, or in a different industry, and also your family and people that you know will give you honest feedback. They could say, actually, I don't know if I love this font because I can't really read it when I look at it from this angle. Or your logo, I like this about it, but I'm not too sure if it layers nicely with these colors. You want someone that maybe they don't think about that stuff, but they're going to say what they like and what they don't like and how it makes them feel. Always ask them how it makes them feel, and you maybe get those answers indirectly. But also, don't ignore the engagement with your brand. So if you, like I said, if you are thinking of a rebrand and you've noticed that people are really not attracted to your brand, or it doesn't accurately represent you, pay attention to those things. So you're constantly thinking about what can I do to better my brand or to improve my brand's exposure or my recognition or my consistency. The most common misconception is that people think their business is their brand, which, as I said, so different. And once you understand that the brand is the personality and it's kind of what connects you. So similar to how an individual is who they are, but their personality is what creates a friendship or an intimate connection with someone. I want you to think about your brand in the same way. It is exactly what attracts the person to your business. Your services are great or your products are amazing, but your brand is what gets them to actually look at them. People are experiencing things all day in their lives. We are all experiencing different things. We are going through the motions. We are doing whatever it is that we are doing in our business or our jobs or our lives or school. And we're not going to just go, most of the time, we're not just going to go search for something. Things come to us nowadays. So when your brand is in front of someone, you want to make sure that that connection is automatic. Okay, I know that was a lot of information. So I'm going to take a quick sip of water. This is kind of a breakdown summary debrief moment.